I had always heard about the butterfly effect, but I had never researched it, and I didn't really know what it was. I remember there being a Ashton Kutcher movie back in the early 2000s about it. I never watched it. I wasn't interested. I was busy, uh, making music, and I was just too busy for it. But yesterday, Missy and I were talking. She's so great about just listening to me. I don't know if complain is the right word, but just like try to figure out my mission in life. I'm always striving to what am I doing, for the kingdom, and sometimes I just don't feel like I'm doing enough. And she's so good. She helps me through so much. But we were talking yesterday, and what I don't even remember what got us on this topic, okay? Because once this hit, I kind of forgot everything else because I started going down this road. Anyway, she started talking about this book called The Butterfly Effect that she had and she had read, and she thought, man, it'd be great. And she goes, I think I still got it. So she went in the house, she found it, and she brought it out to me. This book here. It's real short, thin. It's like 100 pages. You can read it. I've read half of it. There's really just two stories in it. The very beginning explains the premise of the book, and then there's two uh, real stories in it that happen that he uses as real life proof of the butterfly effect. Now, this guy, Andy Andrews, I don't know anything about him. So before you say I'm promoting this guy who's this and that, I don't know. Um, I'm just telling you this is a pretty cool book, and it helped me think about some things. Whether this book was meant to have any kind of scriptural or Christian overtones to it, uh, I don't know. But I always try to view everything that way. So for me, there was. Uh, but anyway, this book, it's subtitled How Your Life Matters. And he wrote this book, he said, I did look up just a little bit. He said he wrote this book because he was coming across a lot of people who were considering uh, not living out their natural life. They were considering ending it early. And so he wanted to write this book about how everything you do matters, and that's kind of even what he says on the back. Every single thing you do matters, and he says a few other things. So, let's just talk for just a little bit about what the butterfly effect is. Okay, so in 1963, this guy Edward Lorenz presented a hypothesis stating that the flap of a butterfly's wings could set air molecules in motion, which could eventually lead to a large scale atmospheric change like hurricanes far away. Initially, his idea was dismissed and laughed at and ridiculed by the scientific community, and it was considered preposterous. But these same scientists, over the next 30 years, started considering it and started trying to apply it in different ways. And then after 30 years, they validated this theory. They renamed it. Let's see what they name it. It was made into a scientific law, like the law of gravity and such. They named it the law of sensitive dependence upon initial conditions. This law asserts that tiny changes in the initial state of a system can lead to vastly different outcomes. The law goes beyond butterfly wings and applies to the movement of any form of matter, including human actions. It implies that every small action or decision matters, creating an expansive ripple effect impacting the present and the future. In other words, everything you do matters. So one of the stories that I read in here was, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. I'm just going to give you the idea of it so you can kind of see how he's applying proof, real life proof that this is true. So there's this guy. The first story that I read was about a guy who's just a school teacher, during the Civil War. He was from Maine, and he was put in charge. He was a colonel. He was put in charge to hold a line of 1,000 men behind this waist-high wall in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, holding the Confederate Army off. And he started with 1,000 guys, and every day this Confederate Army's charging the hill trying to get him. They would back him down, but every day they'd lose more and more soldiers. And so eventually the 1,000 men became 80 men. And not only that, they were running out of ammo, and they may have actually been out. So he's asking, and they said, yeah, we don't even know if we have enough for today. And so he said, look, go around to all our dead brothers and try to find some ammo. And they said, we did that yesterday, so we're really out. So one of the lookouts walked over to the wall, and they saw that this Confederate group was getting ready to charge the hill again. And he goes, sir, they're coming up the hill. We've got to do something. So he's just thinking. He's silent, and they're like, sir, what do we do? And he goes, put the bayonets on your guns and charge. And they put their bayonets on. He got up he stood on the wall, looked right down at the enemy, and because he didn't know, he even said later, he goes, I did not know what to do. He goes, I was not really formally trained for this. So, but he made a decision, and he went and stood on that wall and looked down at the enemy, and he held his bayonet and his gun up in the air and said, charge, charge, charge. And these guys at the bottom of the hill saw that, and they're like, this can't be the same guys we've been fighting. There's been some reinforcements sent to these guys. There's no way. No way these guys would charge us. So they freaked out. They had 400 guys left, but they didn't know they were down to 80. They had 400 guys. They turned around and started running, and many of them dropped loaded guns on the ground. The story goes, within 5 minutes or so, the main guy for who the story was about, he had the other captain on the ground with a gun at his head and said, surrender. And he goes, okay, I do. And within 5 minutes, all 400 of those guys had surrendered to the 80. So the butterfly effect of this is how historians have went back and looked at this, and they said, if he had not made that decision that day, they said that the Confederate Army was going to win that battle at Gettysburg, which would have changed the whole outcome of the Civil War. The South would have won, and there would most likely not be a United States of America today. There would be maybe still the Confederate and the Union, or there might be like Europe was before the European Union, where there's Germany and France, and everybody's just different countries. But as it turns out, he made that decision. The Union won. It became one country. And then later on, when needed, when there was a man named Hitler trying to take over the world, America went and was able to shut that down. And there's other examples of that as well. So the butterfly effect with this guy is like they're crediting him for the whole thing. Like, his decision led to there being a United States of America who was able to beat Hitler and overcome the Japanese of Pearl Harbor and all that stuff. And who knows what life would be like today had that not happened. That's that story. He goes into way more detail, and it's a very interesting read. I haven't read the second story yet. I'm going to soon this week. But I wanted to share that with you. So then I started thinking, well, okay, how about my life then? How does the butterfly effect come into play in my life? Because one of the other things that was talked about was, it's not just every move or decision you make affecting everybody around you and everybody around you, but see, everybody around you is making decisions that affect you and everybody around them. So we're all kind of, what we do matters. I mean, and it's so true. So as a Christian, I was trying to just think about this, and then I started thinking about my own life, and I'll try to keep this short. I'm not trying to bore anybody, but my own kind of story where I can look back and I can see kind of a butterfly effect that I may have started with decisions, but then other people started making decisions, and everything I had going, my career, my marriage, everything, and everything was going great. It was going in a great direction, I thought. But some decisions were made and chain of events started, and everything was gone almost immediately. And so I handled it like you can expect. I moved to a loft in the middle of Nashville in the pit of hell down there, and I was just miserable and depressed and drinking and just hanging out all night and just barely only by the grace of God did I even survive. Somehow I still worked, paying for a couple places, and I don't even know how it was happening, but for God. But later on, once I moved out of there and moved to my next location, which was a lake house I rented for 4 years and set up a studio there. And um, but somebody I had met during that first year while I was living down there called one night or texted one night asking if I wanted a dog. And of course, I did not want a dog. Never thought about it. But I said, well, let me send me a picture. And she did. She said she and her boyfriend were standing outside and they saw this dog get thrown out of a moving truck. And they ran over to see if the dog was okay. And she was laying there shaking and scared, but didn't look like she was broken up or anything. She was soaked in fleas and had some scars on her, and she was scared. But they picked her up and they took her in and they gave her a few flea baths. And when they sent me a picture, I said, I'm on my way. And they lived an hour and a half away, and it was storming that night, but I went down anyway and got what, I don't know if you can see that dog right there, that another great friend of mine made for me as a part of this whole butterfly, a friend that I would have never met, by the way, had all these, had all this chain of events. I'm going somewhere with this. Just stick with me. Uh, but that's my dog, Abby, and she passed away a couple years ago. But she was 15. I got to be with her for 14 years. She was probably a year old when I got her. But that's a chain of event that happened, and that came through a relationship that I had down in when I was just in a pit of despair and everything. But then I moved, you know, up to another little town, and I start meeting some other folks, and um, that now have become family. Like they're not even friends anymore. They're family, and they'll be family the rest of my life. One of them I get to work with every day on his music, and I'm having a blast working on music again. But uh, something else that happened that would have never happened uh, is I went and I had ended up putting music to a 5-minute promotional video for somebody, and uh, the guy who uh, the lady who had hired me to do it about a year later, we were still friends, and she and her husband had to go out of town for a week, and they had horses and stuff, and they asked me to watch their horses. So the day before the trip, I went over to their house to be trained. Here's where the food is. Here's how you feed them. Here's all the different animals you got to take care of. So I did all that. And while I was there, this lady got an email from somebody in California who was looking for a camera person to go on a trip to Iraq to make a documentary. And I had just bought a camera, and it's still sitting over there. But I didn't even hardly know how to use it. And I said, I don't know, because this lady asked me, did I know anybody? And I said, no. I have a camera though, and I'm willing to do it. And well, she told them that. She responded with that. And of course they did right by themselves, and they try to find somebody better, which they should have. But as it turns out, I guess I was supposed to go on that trip, and I did, and I learned a lot on the fly, in a strange land, in a totally devastated place, sorrow, despair all around, towns destroyed. ISIS was a real thing. I saw, and I actually saw. I was on a battlefield one time and was able to see them across the way. So it was a real thing. But again, the butterfly, this ripple effect from decisions that had been made and set in motion. And at this point now, I can't imagine that never having been a part of my life. So now those guys that I made this movie with are family. They're lifelong friends. I hadn't seen them in 9 years. And last week, 3 of them flew from California just to spend a couple days with me here in Chattanooga. And they wanted to meet my new wife, which is another part of this ripple effect, this butterfly effect that I can trace. And just based on how certain events set things in motion. So when I think about all those things, oh, and by the way, Jimivision, this channel, wouldn't even exist because I wasn't going to do that. Uh, there's just so many things like that. And then when I spent 13 years being single and looking for my wife, I gave up. I had tried a few times. I dated a few people, and they're good people. They just wasn't the right person. They weren't. We weren't on the same page with God and stuff. And uh, I finally gave up, and I said, God, I want to be married to a godly woman. If you want that for me, I'm gonna quit looking. I believe I'm gonna find her. She's gonna find me through this channel. And it might have been 2 years. Within 2 years, that's exactly what happened. My wife now, Missy, had watched the channel for a while, and when she found herself in the unfortunate situation of being a widow and being widowed for a little while, she reached out. We started talking, and it felt right, and we're married, and I couldn't even be happier. I can't imagine, and I just can't imagine it. So, I know it's just kind of my story, but I bet if you think about your own life, about decisions that were made or whatever, and you can see how things turned out for you, or maybe how they might have turned out if you can think about if you'd have made a decision, because I've done that little exercise a couple times. I'll remember a crossroads in my life, and I'll go back, man, if I'd have went down that road, I would have never been in Petra. I would have never, I can just go down this whole road, and I can just see So I can just see a lot of this, and that's why I think this had such a big impact on me today when I read it, and I just wanted to share that with you. But let me leave you with one other thing because I'm going to do a few more videos showing this from Scripture. Okay, I've already looked up some scriptures to prove this. I want to use this concept uh, from a Christian viewpoint, a Christian standpoint, and how it affects us, how we can really pay attention to it, and just be aware of how everything we do matters and how it affects us and people around us, and you know the decisions we make. If we decide to get up every day, spend some time in the Word, spend some time in prayer, that is going to set in motion a chain of events that has some good effects. I think some good results, but I just want to leave you with this for now. When I'm thinking about what would be the greatest butterfly effect of all time, and then I start thinking, well, that's pretty easy. God became a man. He became flesh and dwelt among us. He was born into this flesh. Jesus lived an obedient, sinless life, obedient to the law of Moses, which was required at the time. He lived it perfectly, fulfilled it upon his sacrifice, his death, his burial, his resurrection, his ascension, sitting down at the right hand of the Father, sending the Holy Spirit back to us to empower each one of us to where we now go out and spread the gospel of the kingdom all over the world. Is that not the greatest butterfly effect of all time?